Good afternoon. So, apologies for the lack of content in the last few days. There's been some technical issues my end with the laptop, and I've received comments in the comment section regarding the quality of the camera and the quality of the sound. Don't worry, that will be rectified soon. There is a new laptop in the pipeline, hopefully within the next month or so, maybe sooner than that. We will replace the aging Hewlett Packard with a up-to-date Chromebook. So, unfortunately, the old beast is nearing the end of its life cycle. I've had the laptop for nearly 6 years. It is sort of aging. The hard drive's packing in. There's issues with the drivers that run the camera. The microphone is not where it used to be in sense of quality. So don't worry, have no fear. There will be a um, newer setup soon. Um, Obviously, over the weekend, in sad news, Sir Bobby Charlton has passed away. Manchester United and England legend, the second highest goal scorer in Manchester United history, only surpassed by obviously Wayne Rooney in more recent years. And of course, I will be doing a video on Sir Bobby Charlton and his career in due course. So there's that in the pipeline. It is a shame that he has now passed away, but he had a good innings. He had a good innings, let's be honest. And what he brought to the game cannot be understated. And of course, he was one of the Busby babes that survived the Munich air disaster. And that has had that air disaster, that moment in history, had a massive impact on the game. and on the future of Man United, because it actually did impact the team. It weakened the team, obviously, with eight. I think it was 8 players in total. Unfortunately, lost their lives in that air disaster, and it impacted their ability going into the 60s and the 70s to be the dominant force. Obviously, Liverpool became the dominant force in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s because of that Munich air disaster. So we'll be looking at the Munich air disaster as well during the Sir Bobby Charlton video, because that is a key turning point in the direction of English football. At that time, Wolves were the dominant team, and so Wolves' dominance was coming to an end, and Manchester United, with the Busby Babes, similar to the class of '92, was starting to challenge Wolverhampton Wanderers, and then the air disaster happens, and it does impact the team for a good 5-10 years. It did impact the development of the team and the direction the team was taking, and also the direction England was taking as well at that time. So there is that. The only one of the holy trinity of Man United players who are legends on that statue left alive is Dennis Law, and we'll do a career video on Dennis Law because he is a very, very interesting player in his own right. I think he was the first player to score 5 goals in a game in any organised league. So even the great Di Stefano couldn't do that. So that is something. Now, on a non-sporting note, I got back into drinking San Pellegrino drinks because there's a local deli near me, which a family-owned Italian deli, which does cracking food. Isn't football boring these days? Well, if you look at my football club history series, you will see certain clubs are dominant at certain times. So in the earlier days of football, it was Preston North End won the first 2 ever Football League titles, and that was their period of that little bit of dominance. Um, Blackburn Rovers were the record holders in the FA Cup for many, many years. Huddersfield had a period of dominance in the 20s, Arsenal in the 30s, and then obviously Liverpool in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s. Manchester United in the 90s and part of the 60s. So with Man City right now, we've been here before. It's very cyclical. Wolves in the 50s, for example. It is Arsenal in the Invincibles era, and that brief period where they were challenging Manchester United. It is very, very cyclical. So, yeah, obviously the economics of the sport has massively changed. Obviously, since the earliest days, and the sport has evolved, rightly or wrongly. We can agree on a lot of points and disagree on other points, but the economics has fundamentally changed. The wages are through the roof, the transfer budgets are through the roof, the spending. ridiculous amount of money. It's like football survives in its own little micro economy, which they don't. Football doesn't live in the real world. You just look at what FIFA are planning to do with the Six Nation World Cup, for example. You look at what UEFA are doing with the expanded Champions League. Sorry, fixture congestion. You look at the devaluation of domestic cup competitions. You look at the TV deal values. You look at the 3 p.m. TV blackout here in the UK. A lot of people say money's done some good for the game. So better facilities and better investment in facilities, better training facilities, better youth systems. You can argue that, and then you look at some of the ridiculous wages being paid and the ridiculous transfer fees being paid, and the amount of debt within the game, which is far higher than what it was pre 1992. I wouldn't say it's going to be Man City constantly. I mean, if the investigation into Manchester City by the Premier League actually has any teeth, because we know they're guilty, because UEFA found them guilty, just the statute of limitations under UEFA's rules meant they got off on a technicality, or they were still guilty of some charges that weren't time limited, then we assume that they're going to be punished. However, what we've seen with football governance and sports governance in general is money talks. Look at World Rugby's plans for this new international 2014 international calendar from 2026. I don't think it actually benefits the tier 2 and tier 3 nations as what on paper it claims it does, because the Six Nations and Rugby Championships will not be impacted by promotion and relegation. It's just the other global series, as it's basically called, they're doing in the women's game. They've sort of replicated that on a grander scale in the men's game. You look at how much you have to spend to get an Olympics, for an example, and how much the bidding process costs alone before you even get to build any of the facilities. You just look at leagues like the NFL, which is just a license to print money. Now, the NFL claims not a single team is losing revenue. They're all profitable, apparently. That's called cooking the books. That cannot be the case, because you look at the other major leagues and there are teams losing money in what should be ultimately a license to print money. So the NFL claims no teams are losing money. That is a lie. However, on the face of it, according to Forbes and Sportico and those other, approximations of team value, allegedly every NFL team makes money. No, they don't. Can you seriously tell me that the Cincinnati Bengals, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Cleveland Browns turn a profit? They can't even fill their stadiums. They can't win. So let that sink in. I wouldn't say it's going to be Man City and Newcastle constantly. I wouldn't say that. I think Arsenal are still quite competitive. I think Liverpool will still be quite competitive because coaching, because youth development, talent scouting. There are some other clubs that are really well run with a lot less money behind them, like Brighton, for example, that are starting to mix things up at the upper echelons of the table. Just because you have money doesn't mean you're actually going to be a success. Look at what's happening with Manchester United and Chelsea. Look at their massive transfer spend and wage spend, and they're hopeless for what they've spent. So money doesn't guarantee success. It's how you spend it, how you invest it. Now, Man City, the ongoing investigation, it's gone very, very quiet, by the way. They need to really, that investigation needs to have teeth. The punishment needs to have teeth to it. But then the other concerning thing in regards to football at the moment is the ongoing individual player betting scandals. Now, there's a few Italian players who've been embroiled in a betting scandal. One of them has now been suspended for 7 months. This follows on the back of Ivan Toney and his betting breaches. This follows on the back of previous players like Sturridge, for example, Michael Chopra. There's another one, Joey Barton, when he was still a player. So this is not a new thing, but it seems to be becoming more and more regular. And so there is a concern that, this is a bit more of a problem than the PFA, the FA, the Premier League, and the European leagues, and the domestic FAs across Europe, and UEFA for that matter. They're burying their heads in the sand, because this is not isolated. This is not just 3 ex-teammates of Juventus, I believe, or AC Milan, I believe. they were playing at the time. This is not just three international teammates and club teammates from Italy who've now gone their separate ways in regards to where they play their club football. This has to be more widespread. Um, the fact that we're now having more high-profile players playing high-profile top-level clubs embroiled in betting scandals. Now, whether they're actually attempting to fix matches or they're just in breach of betting rules, which is a different thing, it will come out in the fullness of time when, if and when the Italian FA decide, with their disciplinary committee, decide to publish their report. But it is deeply concerning. So it's not just an English problem with Ivan Toney and Chopra and Barton, for example. Well, Barton was playing in Scotland at the time, but the principle applies. This is clearly more widespread, and it's quite concerning. And this is at a time when we're discussing, the rise of sports gambling sponsorship. A while ago, Queen's Park Rangers had a lot of issues about financial fair play. Then it all went silent. Yeah, Tony Fernandez, obviously, he's now given up control of the club. He's no longer involved with QPR. QPR were a club. I think Wolves were another one. Technically, if we're going to go by the profit loss rule, 70% of the Football League and Premier League would be in breach, and therefore, it's not just Reading. Reading's the flavour of the month with the footballing authorities, with points deductions and transfer embargoes. But if we were to properly enforce the rules, around 70 odd clubs within the Football League and the Premier League would be in breach of some form of financial fair play or the profit loss rule, or basically financial rules. Shows how toothless the governance is, because it's kind of highly embarrassing when you've got to sanction 70% of your clubs. It shows that the system is failing. Uh, well, look, I mean, to be honest, um, they tried it with Derby. Obviously, Bury were the team, that the club that were thrown under the bus in regards to their collapse. And their collapse, each club has got its own unique circumstances. I think we can all agree that on that. But Bury were the sacrificial lamb for the Football League, and we've got to this point, and Bury was a warning sign. That clearly, obviously, then COVID happens and that changes the whole dynamic. But Bury was the warning sign pre-pandemic that it doesn't matter what level of the footballing pyramid you're at. It was a clear warning sign. Now, what made it worse is when the Accrington chairman came out and said that the home and away fixture alone, that's not including cup games, that'd be the League Cup, the FA Cup, the FA, is it Trophy or Vase? I think it's the FA Trophy, the Football League Trophy. The Accrington chairman said just the home and away games alone, because it's a local derby for Accrington, cost them £250,000 in lost revenue because they're heavily gate reliant. The lower leagues are more reliant fans and attendance, because the TV money is crap under the old TV deal. So when you've got a club chairman saying that's just cost us for our budgeting £250,000 for our budgeting, when Accrington Stanley in the Football League are the team on the lowest budget, when they've just lost £250,000 in revenue from two games being chalked off because Bury have gone out of business, tells you that the system is broken. Now, for the bigger clubs, that's a drop in the ocean. £250,000, that's a week's wages for a player. It's not even a transfer fee anymore. But for a smaller club like Accrington or Forest Green Rovers, because we like talking about Forest Green Rovers on this channel and the glorified pub team that they are, or one of the newly promoted clubs from the National League, that is a massive amount of money that they've now got to find from somewhere. Do they raise ticket prices? Do they raise merchandise prices? Do they raise the price of match day programs? They've got to find that revenue from somewhere. Yes, the WAM Stadium in Accrington. I need to do a video on Accrington Stanley, because I've done a video on the original Accrington, but I need to do a video on the history of Accrington Stanley, because they're a very interesting club. But I use that as an example, and that's the Bury situation. I think the Football League completely failed in their duty of care, as in the governing body. The fit and proper persons test, otherwise known as the directors test, is clearly is a joke at this point, because I forget who the guy was who ended up becoming owner of the club at the time, but it clearly sums up the weakness of the governance of the sport, and it shows the flaws with the system where somehow some of these really none of these some of these people should be nowhere near a football or any sport team for that matter. Now, what we've seen since Bury went bust is I think Macclesfield were another one who went bust following relegation from the Football League. So I think we've been lucky during the pandemic that we've only technically lost one team that were a Football League club at the start of the pandemic season, which is 2019-2020. However, that season we also lost Bury. But it's becoming more concerning that Southend are on their knees, Reading are on their knees, Scunthorpe United on the verge of going out of existence. This is getting quite concerning. These are not isolated incidents. This is it's a mess. I can't comment on the French system. I really can't. I can't comment on a league system that I don't know much about. But I know what's happened to Bordeaux. But they're owed money by another club, Barcelona, for a transfer fee that wasn't paid. They were banking on. They were relying on that money to budget for following seasons. They're still owed money from Barcelona. There's a reason why they are in the situation they're in. Historical French club basically left bankrupt because of another club failing to fulfill its financial obligations. This is where the transfer system is broken. Oh, this San Pellegrino stuff's really nice. I love my Italian delis. Oh, I've got to go back to that Italian deli because I bought some tortellini. Wonderful for lunch, dinner. Absolutely filled me up. Small bowl filled me up. Brilliant. Problem is, everything on the back is in Italian, and I just worked out 2 to 3 minutes. If you have financial issues, they may relegate you sometimes 2 divisions at a time. Arles, Avignon, second division to the seventh division. I mean, look, again, I can't comment on the French Football Federation and their rules, or the French league system and their rules, because I don't follow French football. But if they've got very strict rules in place, I think that punishes the fans. It's not the players' fault. And with the Bordeaux situation, that was the fault of Barcelona. Barcelona screwed them. They didn't pay them the money that they owed. There seems to be no sanction for Barcelona, no sanction for Real Madrid. But clubs that have obviously budgeted for the following season, relying on these transfer payments that haven't been paid by Barcelona and Madrid, are struggling financially, which says to me the transfer system is broken. Now, UEFA have obviously announced, on my other channel, I did a video on the Ivan Daliot, what's happening down above as a shareholder. Evian. Oh, again, I'm going to have to dig a little bit deeper, but these aren't, Evian and Arles and Avignon aren't the biggest clubs going. If that was like Paris Saint-Germain or Lyon or Monaco, then that does send shockwaves a little bit. Saint Etienne, I think, they were to go belly up, very historical and successful club historically, that would send shockwaves through the game. But these are much more smaller, lower level clubs. It doesn't register for fans outside of that club, really. But no, it is showing that the system financially is broken. In Italy, it happens all the time. Parma, for example, Palermo. There's two clubs that have been in Serie A at various points in their history who collapsed and reformed multiple times. I think was it Livorno or Ancona? They went completely belly up. I know Bari have nearly basically been reformed. I mean, there's some big clubs in Italy that have gone tits up, bankrupt, and reformed. I did my video on Pro Vercelli. The most dominant side in the early years of Italian football. They've gone belly up, bankrupt, and this is not just unique to Scottish football with Gretna or English football with Bury and Macclesfield and Chester and Hereford and Rushden and Diamonds. Oh, Fiorentina were on their knees. Perugia were on their knees. I mean, this is, again, as I say, this is not unique to it is Deportivo La Coruña are in the third tier of Spanish football. I mean, they really took it to the big clubs in Spain in the early 2000s and the late 90s. Um, this is a widespread issue across the big leagues in Europe and some of those lesser national leagues in Europe. This is not just an isolated thing. This clearly shows that the spending rules and the football finances in what should be ultimately a sport that is a license to print money shows that isn't the case. If some of the biggest clubs by value, according to Forbes and Sportico and Barcelona and Real Madrid, have got more debt than some countries' GDPs, tells you all you need to know um, uh, about the situation. Um, and it's one of the reasons why I'm slowly falling out of love with the sport. Is because it's so badly governed. It's corrupt as hell. You know, we're basically the 2034 World Cup is going to Saudi Arabia. FIFA have designed it in such a way with the Six Nation World Cup in 2030 because those nations involved in that Six Nation World Cup were all bidding for tournaments at the same time as Saudi Arabia announced or planning to bid. At the same time, Saudi Arabia said, we're bidding for a tournament. The rugby union changes. Oh, what, the 2026? Yeah. Um, I've discussed it in part. I mean, Courtney Laws is retiring at the end of this World Cup, so he may get 106 caps. He probably will be captain for the third, fourth place playoff on Friday. He's only the fifth English player to make 100 caps. I'm going to just move my laptop a little bit. My back is killing me, so I love having a bad back and being in my mid-30s and broken and requiring surgery on the shoulder. I'm just going to make myself a bit more comfortable because my back is buggered. I need to change jobs desperately, or I need this to make me money. Yeah, so I have. All I know is that Tonali and Zanolio are still under investigation by the um, Italian Football Association. One of their teammate, one of the other players, has been suspended for 7 months. So there were three players involved. They were sent home from the Italian international squad when these allegations and the investigation did surface publicly. Tonali, I think, is eligible for selection by Newcastle because this is an Italian investigation, and we'll see what happens. It's very similar to Ivan Toney, I think. I don't think they've been betting to fix matches. I think they've been in breach of betting rules by betting on games. So I don't think we are seeing a match fixing scandal. We just have players breaching betting rules. It's like Stuart Bingham in snooker when he was betting on snooker matches. Yes, I have read also about expanding of the World Cup and changing the size of the pools, and so the top two go through and the best four third place teams. Sort of similar to the current UEFA Euros, for example. Going to use exactly the same format. Oh God, that sun! Look at that, glowing sunlight. I don't understand why. If you want that money, you have to gamble. Gambling is meant for poor people who are trying to get it big. That's not how it works. Addiction doesn't work that way. I think the way we can describe the current issues with gambling is Paolo Rossi in the late 70s, early 80s, when there was a betting scandal and he was suspended, given a suspended prison sentence, and then there was an appeals process, and he ended up being the best goal scorer, top goal scorer at the 1982 World Cup for Italy on the way to Italy winning the World Cup. I think, according to the Italian FA, they could face a max ban of 3 years. Their careers are finished if that is the length. I don't think so. I mean, look, we've been here before with back in the early 80s with Paolo Rossi. Now that betting scandal, match fixing scandal. I mean, I've got to look at the Italian betting scandal, football scandal of the late 70s, early 80s in a bit more detail. There was bribery involved in that. This is completely different. This is very, very similar to Ivan Toney. I think the English FA have set a precedent now, which I think the Italian FA, if there's extenuating circumstances and the players hold their hands up and say, "Yeah, I've done it," plead guilty, I think they'll get lesser suspensions. With some of that backdated to the start of the investigation, so you may see some of that suspension suspended. Um, I think Joey Barton was given 18 months, but Joey Barton's breaches when he was a player was 1,800 odd matches he was gambling on over a significant period of time, both when he was playing in England for QPR and Man City and Newcastle, all the way up to when he was playing at Rangers. I don't think they would be finished, but it would be certainly slow for them. Bronson Sherry is coming back after 4 years. Yeah, no, he's. Which club is he going to? Is he going to Canterbury? I think. Could be wrong with Bronson Sherry. He's going. Who signed him? Someone signed him. He's been signed for next year. But that was a doping ban. That is different. That's different set of circumstances. That's deliberately cheating. That's deliberately doping to gain an advantage with physicality and recovery. It was Canterbury. Yeah, I mean, look, Shandor Earl was the sacrificial lamb with the peptide scandal and was thrown across. He came back for a couple of seasons, but his career never recovered. But Bronson Sherry, that is different. That's a different sport, different circumstances surrounding it. But Cronulla did the right thing, mate. They got rid of him. They'd obviously had their own culture issues with the peptide scandal, but the club was in a different place, different board, different coaching setup, and I do believe Cronulla did the right thing. But the fact that he's unrepentant, that's where he's different to Shadow Earl. Shadow Earl was misguided. He was young and misguided and not full knowledge of the facts. Oh yeah, he did. There is no doubt that. I feel sorry for Shadow Earl, but he wasn't. Look, he was a squad player, but he hadn't doped before the peptide scandal. He was told by his club and the club doctors that this was all okay, all above board, and then Stephen Dank gets involved, and the rest is history, and we move on from that. But he was unfortunately the fall guy for the NRL to satisfy the NRL saying that we ban some people. He was the fall guy because federal police got involved because he was caught transporting banned substances without realising they were illegal. So there was a federal court case involved in that one, which is different. Bronson Sherry, I think it's Sherry, is that it? Or Zeri? I think it's Sherry. In his case, there's been no repentance. He was blatantly doing it from his junior days. Blatant. Clearly, it was a targeted test with him because no one else on the Cronulla team failed the test. It was targeted. It was information led. So whether one of his teammates said, "Look, something's not right here," that's well, Bronson Sherry was younger when Bronson Sherry, but the difference is Shandor before the peptide scandal had never doped. He was clean. He was told he was told everything he was doing was okay. Clearly, it wasn't, but there was a lot of. It wasn't just the Cronulla Sharks that were buggered. There were individual players at other clubs like Shandor Early were, involved with Stephen Dane and were recommended to go to this sports scientist for injury recovery and fitness and dietitian and all that. So, and it also involved the AFL. Now, the Essendon Bombers, I mean, Christ, that was an absolute shambolic shit show of a AFL investigation and a SARDA investigation and WADA investigation. That was absolutely shambolic. Embarrassing. The NRL, obviously, their investigation into the Cronulla players was similarly all over the place, but they really needed a full guy. Chandra was the guy who really, I think, got harshly treated, and he was thrown under the bus. Now, in Bronson Sherry's case, I have no sympathy for him. Blatantly doping, blatantly doping from his junior days for many years. And clearly someone at the club, teammate most likely, or maybe a rival player at another club who may have played with him at juniors, has basically given a tip off anonymously because that was a targeted test by the NRL, by SADA. They caught him, bang. They're only 23. Danny Wicks did 5 years in jail for trafficking. Yeah. Yeah, look, I think with Bronson Sherry, who Canterbury have obviously signed him. Obviously, Gus Gould's had a conversation in regards because he's in charge of recruitment, and Serraldo's obviously had a conversation as well about if he screws up, he's out the door. This is his last chance saloon. Should he be given a second chance? It's open for debate. From what I can tell from the comments, possibly not. But we've had the same thing in track and field athletics. You know, when I was watching, I remember as a kid watching the Atlanta '96 Summer Olympics, and this is at a time when the '88 Olympic final they were retesting samples. Now, what is interesting is the '88 Seoul Olympics. I think 88% of the athletes there were doping in some way or another. And a lot of their retrospective samples, and later on, that 100-meter final in the '88 Olympics, only one out of the 9 athletes had a completely clean career, and he was the guy who finished last. All the other athletes, including Lincoln Christie, Carl Lewis, participated in that 100 meters final at the Seoul Olympics, were subsequently banned or investigated for steroids or you know performance enhancers in some way, including the late, obviously Lincoln Christie, who's a British sprint legend. And some of them were even denying up to the point they were caught that they were clean. Carl Lewis was saying, I'm clean. I'm clean. But later transpired to be a lie. It's the same with Lance Armstrong and Floyd Landis and Marco Pantini, the late great Marco Pantini, the pirate, and pro cycling, following the Festina scandal in '98, all the way up to Lance Armstrong's bombshell in the late 2000s. Pro cycling, there is not a shred of what's the term? Pro cycling cannot hold its head high because there were rumours circulating for many years, about doping and cycling going back to the 60s. Back in the 60s, it was amphetamines, cocaine, and alcohol. That's the integrity. By the 70s and 80s, especially with the Olympic programs, state-sponsored doping got in there. And then by the 90s and the 2000s, with more TV revenue, more sponsorship revenue, losing was not much. Eddie Merckx, if they were to test all of Eddie Merckx, he would have all his titles stripped as well, the great Eddie Merckx. Because he was the guy who actually introduced Lance Armstrong to doping. But, oh God. I love San Pellegrino sparkling drinks. They are the best. Bit bitter, but they're good for you. I call that posh lemonade or posh orange juice or orangina. I call it posh stuff. But no, there's a nice Italian deli not too far from me, not too far from my work actually. It's closer to my work than to my flat. It's family run. Oh, they do some good stuff in there. So I think on payday, Saturday, I'm going to go out to the deli. I'm going to pick up a bottle of wine for my brother's birthday. My mum, my stepdad, and my brother. And I'm going to pick up some of the pastries they've got there. Oh, I love Italian food. Don't I'm going to salivate. Papu Gomez, currently playing for AC Monza, was found guilty of doping in October while playing for Sevilla and was in Argentina winning squad. Look, again, obviously he's not. He's obviously loose. It all depends on his B sample. He has the right to his B sample to be tested. If his B sample comes back with a different test result, then that raises questions of the whole testing process. But there were 3 Russian players at the 2018 World Cup who had failed an A sample and were under investigation. who played in the Russian squad at the 2018 World Cup. So this is not a new thing. This is not something that's just happened overnight. I don't think doping in football is as widespread as doping in rugby union or rugby league. Um, I, you know, uh, Michael Jennings is another one. Now, in that case, because he's had his B sample now, that's why he was allowed to play at the World Cup because his B sample hadn't come back. But it's like Paul Pogba. Pogba's career's done. Done. His B sample came back positive. Pogba's done. Which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing because Paul Pogba's an enigma. But Paul Pogba's test result came back. I nearly bought some Nokia earlier. I did actually nearly buy some Nokia. I really did. I was looking at it and went, no, I'll get the tortellini with oh, what meat filling did it have? Prosciutto ham. Prosciutto ham. Yeah, I nearly bought. I actually nearly bought some Nokia. I was tempted, but don't because I'm going to go out to that deli in a few days and buy some more food, good food. But no, Paul Pogba's been found to have failed his B side. It's like Kolo Toure got done um, um, with weight loss medication that's on the banned list unless you actually have a health reason to use it. I mean, yeah, but they didn't strip obviously Maradona's achievements, even though he failed multiple drugs tests. Adrian Mutu's failed multiple drugs tests, admittedly for recreational. Although in Maradona's case, he had a cocktail of everything in his system in '94, but he failed again in '95. So they become stricter in the length of bans, but you look at what was in Maradona's system in '94. I mean, Jesus Christ, he was a pharmacist's wet dream. Doesn't matter if you're giving illegal narcotics or prescription meds. Maradona in '94 had enough substances in his system to kill a crackhead. But in regards to Pogba and Kolo Toure before him and others, they've made the length of bans longer. So if you plead guilty after, yeah, no, I've done it, don't deny, you get a lesser ban, you get mitigation. A lot of these, I mean, it's like some of these boxers saying they're meat. Contaminated meat is the latest excuse that a lot of Mexican or people who've been training in Mexico for boxing and MMA are using is the meat I was eating was contaminated. There are others saying, oh, Richard Gasquet, the tennis player, said, oh, he came into contact with cocaine because he was on a date with a woman, and obviously they had a kiss, and clearly that's how enough cocaine got into his system to fail a test. It wasn't background trace amount; it was enough for him to actually have been off his trolley. Some of the excuses some of these athletes come out with for why they failed a test doesn't matter if it's for a recreational or um, performance enhancing substance. It is ridiculous. I don't think FIFA and UEFA are going to do fuck all. I don't think they're going to do nothing. He's not a high profile player in the sense, yes, he's part of a winning squad, but he's not high profile. If it was Messi or McAllister, then yeah, that using him as an example because he obviously plays at Liverpool now, formerly of Brighton. If he was one of the more high profile Argentinian players, then yeah. Pogba's failed his B sample. He's got a 4-year ban. He's done. He's facing up to a 4-year ban. I mean, if he shows mitigation and contrition and actually pleads guilty, that will be reduced. But he's facing up to 4 years ban. Thick as mince. Paul Pogba is the baggage. I mean, there's a reason why Man United let him go twice. There's a reason why Juventus let him go the first time and then took him back for some reason, and are now regretting taking him back. He's been a problem ever since he was first signed by Man United. There's a reason why, yeah, he somehow managed to win a handful of trophies and a World Cup somehow. How he's done that is beyond me, but he's managed to do it somehow. He's appeared in 3 major international finals. I mean, how this player he has stolen a living basically. He's stolen a living. there is no doubt on his actual skill level when he's motivated and when he's actually willing to do what he's paid to do, which is play the game. Um, but the background, his personal life is a shambles. He really, God, he was a nightmare. Um, but I, all I can say is this: I don't think um, Papu Gomez has his medal stripped because I don't think he's the only player from most squads open. If it was Messi, Kevin McAllister, Julian Alvarez, then there would be question over Argentina. Yeah, again, he was a squad player. He was part of the squad. Yes, he contributed as it is a squad game to ultimately being part of the squad that lifts the trophy. He's won some European titles with Sevilla. Um, Monza must be looking at this, going, "Why have we signed this player?" They must be going, looking at themselves, going, "Oh, this is a bit of a PR nightmare." Um, he's just joined the club. He's failed his A sample and B sample. It's not a good look. That's the second player in Italy in the last couple of months to fail a drug test. Um, yeah, look, I mean, the whole Pogba thing though is it it really is it's just shambolic. But then you look at the culture at Manchester United when he was there, and now you look what's happened to Mason Greenwood and, and other players who've had some allegations against them, like Anthony and all this. It does raise the questions of the recruitment side of things. Back in the day, before the Glazer takeover, there was a no dickhead policy. Now, yes, admittedly, some of the players like to drink and like to bet on the horses and all that, but there was nothing like domestic violence allegations, doping allegations, and basically being a dick. The drink culture's always been part of football, but something has changed since the Glazers have taken over. The culture um, within that club become very toxic, and I think you look at the interviews that like Cantona and Roy Keane have given. They were hard bastards. Let's be honest, but they were no nonsense players. Cantona was a bit of a maverick, but he didn't take no crap from a hooligan who was throwing racial and slurs at him. He kicked his head in. But these guys have principles. You may not like them. I mean, I loved Cantona. He was just a fantastic player. Could do crazy stuff. Roy Keane, hard as nails. Oh, I remember Shaka Hislop. I've met Shaka Hislop. Great player, great goalkeeper. Currently working, is it ESPN in America as a pundit? And he's the best pundit they've got. Um, I remember Shaka Hislop. I've got to do a career video on Shaka Hislop. Brilliant player, brilliant goalkeeper. Um, watched him play many times um, over the years, especially when he was playing for Portsmouth. I watched Shaka Hislop play many, many times. Got fond memories of Shaka Hislop. Um, underrated goalkeeper, legend in Newcastle as well, Shaka. Um, brilliant goalkeeper. Yeah. Um, what is it with Italian football these betting doping scandals? They're not the only league or the only Italian leagues. It's not just them. It just seems at the moment that's where there appears to be a couple of issues with players failing dope tests and players who left the Italian league, who were playing in the league at the time, being embroiled in breaching betting rules. Now, I don't think, as I say, the players were betting to fix matches. The players were betting on matches, which is in breach of betting rules. Now, as I say, they strike me as very, very similar to Ivan Toney. and different to Daniel Sturridge. Daniel Sturridge was giving inside information to people that was basically insider trading on where he was going to be playing. Kieran Trippier is another one. So this is not isolated to Italy. It's Italy at the moment where the headlines are coming from. It could be Spain next week. It could be France. It could be Germany. It could be the Austrian league. It could be anywhere, right? At the moment, the spotlight's on the Italian league because there's a few high-profile um, incidents. Um, but a couple of years ago, it was players based in Spain getting done for tax evasion. This is not just isolated to Italy with scandal within the sport, um, but it does show that, and it's not just European football where this is a problem. This is again a wider issue across professional sport. We've seen it in every continent, in every major sporting league. It's not just isolated to the Italian league system or the English league system or the Spanish league system. It does. There are issues across the leagues, and we've seen yeah, a lot of issues. In regards to what Major League Baseball, look, I would like to see the Diamondbacks, a team from Arizona, actually win a major trophy. Would be kind of a shot in the arm for pro sports in Arizona at the moment. I would like to see the Diamondbacks do it. There's also a lot of illegal betting in obscure lower leagues, especially Asian illegal betting. Yeah, that's well known. I watched a Australian Four Corners episodes in regards to gambling on sport, um, and especially lower levels like community level, fifth level football in Melbourne, um, and the rugby league, and where and how the major like the A League, the NRL, and the AFL have signed agreements with betting companies in regards, and that's where they're getting a lot of their revenue from. Now, the NRL will be taking games to Vegas next year. They've already, before the game's been played, they've made $300 million. Um, so, yes, but I've watched a lot of documentaries and read a lot of articles in regards to betting. I think there was a betting syndicate in Singapore um, that was involved in a match fixing network, and there was another one in where was it? Hong Kong or Philippines. There's been a few that have been involved with match fixing in cricket and in football and snooker. But look at the snooker betting scandal with match fixing. Um, so there's a lot going on. This is, as I say, um, cricket and snooker are two sports that are really vulnerable um, to match fixing. Same with tennis. I mean, as I say, and this is the concern. This is what I don't think the authorities in the US have quite grasped, and Canada, especially with the major leagues in North America now getting these sponsors from the gambling industry. I don't obviously say companies, but some well-known bookmakers in Australia and the UK are all part of the same group of companies. And you would recognise names, are now also getting operating licenses to operate in the US. What also doesn't help is when you've got people like Pat McAfee, who I love watching his show, I love watching his live stream, and I love watching his content, even though I'm not an NFL fan. And when it's the NFL off season, it's a bit more interesting because they do look at other sports and interviewing other sport figures. He's had Michael Francesi as a guest on his show more than once. Now, he was an ex-crime boss in the mafia syndicate, and one of his money-making schemes was fixing collegiate NCAA sport. Yes, a couple of there's been, I think there were 12 players or in total, but some have got lengthy bans, some have got lifetime bans, some have got reduced bans with mitigation. There's a couple of English and Welsh players as well. This is snooker's when Stuart Bingham was the first one that came about before COVID. It sort of opened the floodgates a little bit. Bingham's case, he breached betting rules by betting on snooker matches with no intent to fix. He got 6 month ban. Stephen Lee was the big one when he got 10 years, which is basically a life ban. And Stephen Lee's ban is still not ended yet. He's still got years left on his ban. His career's over. But no, there was a handful of players who got life bans. Yes. But no, the this is where I don't think the major leagues in the US and Canada, like the NHL, the NFL, and the NBA, and Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer, and all that, I don't think they fully realise what Pandora's box has been opened. Because in Europe, we're pushing back against the gambling companies. Australia is sort of halfway to where we are, and the Americans are just waking up, getting used to the fact that gambling companies, they're incessant advertising. Now, look at the amount of match fixing scandals and betting scandals just in the last year alone we've had. Now, it's involving individual players. It's not involving teams match fixing, but it's involving individual players in sport. And it's involving periods in time. It's quite alarming. Quite alarming how many individual players, for example, we'll go with football, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's happening in rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, cricket, and some of the other major team sports. Football's the one that's going to grab the headlines in Europe. Potentially ice hockey and basketball on the continent, but you know, football, soccer, that's what's going to grab the headlines because these are bigger name players. Football's fan base is global. The other team sports are a bit more niche, so not all the players are household names. But it wouldn't surprise me if it's happening in the other team sports, professional team sports. It would not surprise me in the slightest. Now, it would not surprise me if it is going on in the US and Canada in their major leagues where players are breaching the betting. Would not surprise me. But the landscape has changed since Donaghy, the referee, the NBA referee, was caught in 2008 and Operation Slapshot in 2006. The landscape has changed since the late 2000s when those incidents happened, where illegal gambling was taking place and there was police investigations and FBI investigations and not all the court documents had been fully released and people went to jail. And there was litigation about publishing of memoirs and books and biographies and all sorts. A lot has changed. The landscape, obviously, in North America has changed with the changing of gambling laws. But I don't think the sporting authorities in the US and in Canada, those professional leagues and the collegiate system, I don't think they're fully prepared for what is going to hit. Because when that first high profile player gets done for breaching betting rules and gets handed a pretty chunky suspension, that's going to set alarm bells really ringing. And when it starts happening in more regularity, like we're seeing in European football right now, I remember we've seen it in rugby league as well in Australia. I forget the player's name. Ultimately, he took his own life. I forget that player's name, but he did play at the 2013 Rugby League World Cup. It was just after then that he got caught and did himself. But we are going to see a big betting scandal involving players, I have no doubt, in the US and Canada, in one of the major leagues. It's going to happen. When it does happen, and I bet you it's a high profile player or players as well, that completely changes the debate we are having. Now, from what I can gather from the sports that I follow, the sports YouTubers that I follow, and course, you guys who are my subscribers and viewers who leave comments, from what I can gather, most of you guys either gamble very, very rarely, or you don't gamble at all, and you're not really in favour of the amount of advertising and reliance on the gambling industry for some sports income, from what I can gather. Um, Now, okay, my sample size is going to be a lot smaller than, let's say, a bigger channel or a proper survey done by a university that are studying social trends. So the sample size we've got is not very scientific, but it well, there you go. You only bet on the Grand National. That's one horse race once every 12 months. My gambling, occasionally I get a National Lottery scratch card, and occasionally I get a Euro Millions once every couple of weeks. I don't gamble on sport. I don't gamble on fruit machines anymore. I used to. Used to be quite good at it as well. I know how to read machines and win a lot of money, which is scary. I don't gamble on sport. I don't even gamble on the Grand National anymore, or the Derby, or Royal Ascot, which I used to do. So I don't go down the Ladbrokes. I'm going to use Ladbrokes because there's one in the town centre where I live, which is right next to Vodafone, where I go for my internet. It's right next to the other shop that does EE, which is my other phone. So I have to go into town occasionally, and it is in the town centre. But I don't gamble, and as I say, I'm only using the channel comment section and viewers on live streams as a sample size. So that limits myself to 1,141 subscribers, depending on count, and X amount. I've got to go through the comment section and go, have a look here, which means trawling through over 2,500 videos, which I'm not going to do, by the way, because I do have a life. I don't just live on YouTube, but from what I can gather, the majority of you rarely gamble or if at all, and are not really in favour of it. That doesn't mean I think it should be illegal. It's one of the most highly regulated industries in this country going. There's more regulation surrounding the gambling industry than the tobacco and alcohol industries, for example. It's one of the most heavily regulated industries going, at least in the UK. I don't know how the regulation works in other countries, because every country has its own laws and regulations, and obviously in some countries it is still completely illegal, and other countries it's very legal and very openly legal. But every country has its own jurisdictions and laws and customs. So I can only comment on the UK and the regulation. Now, yes, gambling does appear to be a problem in more, I wouldn't say run down as well, but poorer communities, or communities that are less wealthy. That doesn't mean that there isn't gambling addicts who are multimillionaires who are throwing money around, as we're seeing with football players. But I do think with the rise in at the moment it's football players, but we've seen snooker players as well. In the rise of gambling related scandals and gambling breaches of breaching of when it comes to players, professional athletes, professional sportsmen, because I wouldn't really call a snooker player an athlete. You're not going to the gym to bench press 400 pounds, but it is concerning, and we do have to look at the transparency of the code of conduct and the various rules that are in place. I think they're transparent and publicly available. Like literally, just go on a governing body's website, and there it is. Now, from what I can gather, players are football players, rugby league players, cricket players, ice hockey players, basketball players, whatever sport you want to play, are fully aware of the code of conduct, the gambling rules, and what is and isn't acceptable, and what you can and can't bet on. So yes, you could be a football player, but you could be betting on the horses, or you could bet on the golf, or you could bet on the dogs, the greyhounds, but you can't bet on football. And that's where Ivan Toney obviously fell down. But I do think we need to seriously look at um, the amount of advertising, that sponsorship, you know, that the gambling companies have. What I find very interesting with the YouTube algorithm and the tracking cookies that you get on websites is when I finish this video, this live stream, I will have a range of things that I would like to watch. I may want to watch a history documentary. When the ads come on, the mid-roll ads, the ads at the beginning, the mid-roll ads, and the ads at the end, they'll be related to your general run-of-the-mill, Halloween advert for like a chocolate, let's say, um, or a supermarket or a clothing store that's doing a Halloween costume. No, I'm just using that as an example because it's that time of year. Halloween's next week. No, this week, should I say? Or is it next week? No, it is next week. And that makes sense, right? You might get an insurance, like a car advert, something like that. But when I go on a sports YouTuber on YouTube, the gambling ads suddenly appear. Everything else is your pretty generic ads on other channels. But as soon as I go on a sports YouTuber, I'll use the hockey guy as an example. He's my favourite sports YouTuber. Um, the first ad that comes up, gambling ad. The second ad that comes up, gambling ad. And the final ad at the end, gambling ad. And I would say around 70% of the ads when I'm watching his channel, or just after I've watched his channel, gambling ads. When I'm watching, let's say, one of the Pacific Nations rugby league matches that are going on with NRL players, basically, the NRL is organised. I'll watch that on the NRL website, then I might go back on YouTube. I may want to watch Sky. I might want to watch a history documentary or a metal detecting video. These are my other hobbies, right? And then suddenly gambling ads appear, sports gambling. I'm not interested. But because I've the tracking cookies on the computer and the various search engines follow and track what you like on your recent searches, which is why I try and keep the tracking cookies off as much as possible. It comes up. I don't understand why they bet on non-football events. They earn more money in a year than I earn in a lifetime. I calculated on Gareth Bale's weekly wage when he went back to Tottenham online how much he earned in a week, which I think was 660,000 a week before tax. And I calculated the wage I was approximately on without overtime, how long it would take me to earn for that amount of money. It'd take me 30 years. I would be in my late 50s, mid to late 50s, before tax. That is ridiculous. So yes, we can argue about the wages, and we can argue about how much the transfer fees are and how much the players are paid. For a third of Gareth Bale's career, he was playing golf. So yeah, I'm not joking there, but I've actually calculated about a third of his career he was on the golf course. And I think we can fairly. I think that's where the Real Madrid fans quite fairly were criticising him, going, "Well, you're meant to be injured, but you're playing golf. Make it make sense." Um, I as I say, a good humoured bet, like a friendly, get a couple of mates together, get a sweepstake, and bet on the Grand National. I don't see that as a problem. And some of these guys may go, "Yeah, let's go down to the casino and play a bit of blackjack." Right? That isn't a problem. It's when it becomes an addictive issue and they are clearly not seeking the help and they know they're breaking the rules. When they are breaking the rules, the guidelines that are set out, it's in their contracts. Right now, Newcastle go, right, you haven't broken the rules at this club that we're aware of. We don't know if he has. He might be still gambling right now whilst he's under investigation by a different FA, and then Newcastle will be like, shit, we have a problem. With Tonali, for example. But what is noticeable is that at the start of every season, they regularly refresh and update the rules if certain things happen, right? Every season, players get told this is what is allowed. This is what not is not allowed. You are allowed to gamble on other sports if you so wish. You can go to the local casino if you so wish. Football, big no-no. Also, if they find out you have a friend or a relative who plays another sport professionally, that sport is also a big no-no. So you might have a brother, you might have a sibling who plays, you could be a football player, your sibling plays rugby union or rugby league. That is a big no-no. Big no-no. So if they find out a friend or a relative is also a professional athlete in another sport, that gets put on the ban list. And the players are told us at the beginning of every season they are given a talk by a league official comes down and just liaises with one of the club officials, and they sit the entire squad from I think is it the 23, 25 man elite squad, and the under 23s and the under 19s. So basically anyone who can play in the first team at any point in the season, right? They get them in a room. You might have 60 blokes in a room from the ages of 16 to 40 who are all players. And they are told, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, this is what is permissible, this is what isn't. And Ivan Toney's case, he decided to ignore that and decided to gamble. Same with Joe Barton back in the day, Michael Chopra back in the day. Is it, I think did Paul Merson get done for gambling breaches? I believe he did. Paul Merson, I think, also got sort of caught up in it, and they are told, and it's the same for every professional sport. As soon as you get into pre-season training camp and the squad's all back in, a league representative will come down, liaise with the coaching staff and the club, and they'll get all the players in the room and say, "You cannot do this. This is what's allowed. You can bet on these sports. You can't bet on these." They will find out if you have a relative, like a sibling or maybe a parent or a cousin. Do you have any other friends or relatives who play professional sport other than the sport you're playing? If that is a yes, that sport is also added to you can't gamble on this. Paul Merson. Paul Merson is a very, very interesting character. He gets slaughtered on social media because he's had relapses with alcohol, drugs, and gambling. He gets thrown under the bus. But if it wasn't for Tony Adams, Paul Merson is dead. Paul Merson has spent time at Tony Adams' recovery centre. If it wasn't for Tony Adams, Paul Merson is dead. It's the end of the story. While I don't particularly like Paul Merson as a character because he's not my favourite cup of tea. I can respect him as a person for being open and honest and brave enough to talk about what I've mentioned as well. Very hard. But no, what I find a bit with Paul Merson is he has appeared on gambling adverts. Yeah, he's got a gambling addiction. I think that I don't think that's his fault necessarily. But no, I think he's been exceptionally open and forthright in discussing his problems. But this is a cultural thing. This is a culture of the locker room. And this is not just football specific, this is all sports. There is a boozing, partying, gambling culture. We've seen it in so many sports. And it is not isolated to the Arsenal dressing room of Paul Merson's day, or the Middlesbrough dressing room when he was at Middlesbrough. It's not isolated to that. It's not isolated to the Brentford dressing room with Ivan Toney, or these Italian players, be it with the national side or when they were at their clubs before they got their transfers. Every sporting dressing room has that boozing culture. You look at rugby league and rugby union and cricket, I mean, Christ, they put people to shame. They can knock the drink back, I tell you. I've been in a clubhouse. They can knock the drink back. So, yes, professional sport has obviously got more professional, and the diets are better, and the fitness is better, and the training's better, the training standards, the quality of training facilities. But that culture from the 70s and 80s is still a thing now in 2023. 40, 50 years after George Best was a raging alcoholic, we're still in that culture of knocking back a few after a game and having a few darts, as they would say, cigarettes. So, I don't think we've left that aspect of it behind. And you can throw the gambling and the drugs in there as well. It's a thing. I call it the laddish party culture, the lad culture. It is still a thing. And you listen to like the Under the Cosh podcast, which I find absolutely hilarious, but it's also really, really like, Christ, this is actually kind of embarrassing. These are grown men acting like children. Because we do have a drink problem in this country. Same in Australia. Australia has a drink problem. We have a drink problem. Um, we have a massive drink culture in this country. Australia's drink culture is even worse. So God knows what an Australian sporting dressing room is some of the stories coming out of there, but it's not. I don't want to sound like a hypocrite because I used to be a pisshead. That makes sense. I used to be a heavy drinker. In fact, I was basically an alcoholic, but I think I was an alcoholic. I just didn't admit to. I decided to stop one day, and I feel a lot better for it. But we definitely have a drink culture. Now, there seems to be a segment of society that's drinking less in my age range, but no, for the most part, we're all still a bunch of pissheads, let's be honest. Australia's drink culture is even worse than the UK. And when I say it's worse, it's really bad. And then there are some countries in continental Europe where it's alcoholism is a thing, where it's just a social thing that's accepted that, you know, your dad's not home tonight, he's drinking, say, a bar somewhere. There are some countries in continental Europe where I think is it Hungary or the Czech Republic where they're pretty much tanked every day. And they've done studies and they've done surveys and they'll tell them, got to answer honestly. And the Czechs came, I think it was either the Czechs or the Hungarians, it was ridiculous. Um, no, when I say you think we drink a lot, I think it is the Czech Republic or Hungary or Poland that just blows it out of the water. I think Finland's quite bad as well. I think it's one of the Scandinavian countries and a couple of the Central European countries. It is ridiculous. And then you're thinking, well, what's so bad then? And the rate of alcoholism and alcohol-related deaths per percentage of population per 100,000 is just ridiculous. But that translates into a dressing room or a locker room of a sports team. And you listen to like the Spitting Chicklets podcast. I can't stand. I used to like the Spitting Chicklets podcast, but Paul Bissonnette and Ray Whit. Right, is it Ryan Whitney? Yeah, it's Ryan Whitney. I'd rather have a brain aneurysm than listen to them because again, it's this childish culture that's surrounded by getting stoned, getting. Cause they're sponsored by an alcohol company. They say drink responsibly, but most of their stories are of we got pissed up and went to restaurants and bars and got smashed. It's just embarrassing. Like, ugh. Been impressed with the Netherlands cricket team, particularly the World Cup, shot by the intensity. Um, we've seen Afghanistan beat England and Pakistan. We've seen the Netherlands beat South Africa. There have been some shocks in the tournament. I haven't been following the tournament. I'm not going to lie. When you put it behind a paywall, it makes it very, very hard to actually feel invested in something when you can't access it easily. And I'm not using an IPTV, VPN, or a legal stream to access it because this laptop is not going to last much longer. I'd rather not kill it just yet because I need to have some money to buy a new one and I don't get paid for a little bit. The intelligence is being down. It's not the last stages of the tournament yet. It's the round robin stage. Um, am I surprised by tournament crowds being low? Well, we're coming out of the pandemic. There is a cost of living crisis globally. It's not just a European thing or North American thing or an Australian thing or South African thing. This is a generalised prices and inflation have been rising. Um, and I don't know how well it's been, advertised and promoted domestically in India, but a lot of the nations going there, their economies, our economy's not doing as well as it should. Australia and New Zealand's economies aren't doing as well as they should. Inflation is really high. It's coming down, um, but there's been issues with a lot of industrial unrest in some of these countries. Like in South Africa, there's 30% unemployment. No one's got any money in South Africa. Australia, the cost of living's through the roof. The UK, the cost of living's through the roof. The Dutch aren't doing so well. And these are just countries coming off the top of my head who are obviously playing at this World Cup. So there's not a lot of disposable income around for people to travel halfway around the world um, to you know, it's not cheap to go to India. The flights are expensive. Hotels are cheap-ish. Depends where you're staying, but it's not cheap to fly to India. Really isn't. It is quite expensive. You've got to get your visas as well. That's another expense depending which country you're from. There are visa restrictions and visa applications you've got to go through. That costs money. Um, I don't know how much tickets are actually going for, which will then price out local fans who've got less disposable income because they earn less money because it's India. Um, and then you've got to look at where the grounds are located. There's one right up on the edge of the Himalayas, for Christ's sake. Not very accessible. Let's be honest. Again, let's be honest there. I think Indian fans will be more interested if it's the IPL or the Indian Test team playing. That's just fact. Um, how well has it been? There's a lot of questions basically to ask about various things going on. As I said, I've not been following it religiously. I've read the odd article, I've read the odd match review, but I haven't watched any highlights. I've not um, seen any footage of it. I can't comment on attendance, average attendance. Are they actually selling tickets? Is this paid attendance versus actual attendance? Because paid attendance is all corporate money. Oh yeah, look, but yeah, I forget where it is, but it's right up in the Punjab, just south of the demarcation line with Kashmir. So it's really right at the top of India before you get to the Punjab and the Kashmir area, which is obviously disputed territory where there's still political violence, terrorism, and all that. Um, but the outfield was atrocious. But the playing surface was really unacceptable. Um, but the view from it was fantastic. Let's not kid ourselves. That was a beautiful view, beautiful setting. You couldn't imagine of playing it in a better place in the world. But are the locals being priced out? Um, yeah, they put the highlights on Channel 5. Great. I don't have my 5 account set up, so and while I would love to, have a my 5 account, I don't really want to have too many passwords to remember. I'm lazy like that, but I haven't watched regular linear TV since I actually would think the Rugby World Cup final in 2019. Not long after the Cricket World Cup final in 2019. Last time I watched proper TV, really. Apart from a brief period during the COVID pandemic where I was getting from work, I was the only member of the household to be allowed out, really. So none of my relatives bloody listened, so I just gave up and went, I hope you all die then, and then one of them did. Not of COVID though, but damn. It would have been interesting. So, well, I told you. I'm not joking. Some of my relatives were like, I'm going to break the rules. So you basically want to risk killing the entire household because you're selfish. They basically said yes. So I was like, I'm going to be moving out soon, and I did, and I haven't looked back. Um, but no, I haven't watched regular TV for the most part for over 4 years. When I last moved out, my last apartment, which many of you will remember, had the window on one side, uh, and was a death trap. Um, I lived there for 6 months. So I want my life back. I moved there 4 years ago, and I moved out just before the pandemic. Yeah, as soon as I moved in there, I stopped watching regular TV. I rarely watch the TV now. The only thing I watch is sport. Oh, and the news occasionally, and the occasional documentary, but I can get all of them on the laptop. So I don't have to watch TV anymore. The TV's over there. Haven't plugged it in. But I've got two TVs in my flat, and they're both for games consoles. I haven't plugged them in. And one's got a DVD player, so I can watch some films occasionally if I really wanted to. But I don't feel the need to want to do that. Well, there's a couple of films I might want to put on, but I've watched all my DVDs multiple times. That it's like, do I? And I've got Netflix if I want to watch a documentary or a film or a TV series that I haven't got on DVD. Got my Netflix account, so I might do that. But no, divert sport a little bit. But no, apart from live sports broadcasts, I wouldn't watch the TV anyway. I think the quality of what is on the TV now is diabolical. And even sports broadcasts are not of the standard that they used to be. I think when I discussed BT Sport being rebranded as TNT Sport, I brought up Laura Woods. Now, I don't think Laura Woods is the worst sports presenter or pundit going. I don't think she's great. I don't think she's bad. I think she's just a solid average, sports reporter and sports presenter. But the quality has definitely gone down with the diversity hires because common sense has left the room because you should hire on ability rather than gender or colour of one's skin or one's religion or one's orientation. Unfortunately, TV bosses have been very reactionary to a minority on social media, and they've decided, in their infinite wisdom, of which there is none with TV executives, because there never has been, thing, um, to basically push agendas that have weakened the quality of the commentary, the punditry, and presenting. We've always had really good female commentators and presenters. Always have had them. It's never not been a thing, at least in my lifetime. And suddenly we've got really people are only there because of their gender, the colour of their skin, or their sexual orientation. And they're like, if you fit all three, you're the right, you're female, lesbian, and black, you're on the TV. But she's not very good. Or if you are mixed race, bisexual, and male, you're on the TV. But again, you're not very good. I would much rather have Micah Richards every day of the week because not only is he enthusiastic about his media role, um, he's very knowledgeable about the sport that he's covering, and that's all you need. That's all you need. He's enthusiastic, he's articulate, and he's knowledgeable about the sport he's covering because he played at a high level. Not at any point, in my opinion, does his background or the colour of his skin or his religion or his sexuality have to do anything with it. He's good at what he does. We have got some absolutely diabolically bad male commentators and pundits at the moment as well. Absolutely diabolical. Um, and but common sense has left the room. I couldn't care if the commentator was male or female. I couldn't give a toss about the colour of their skin, their sexual orientation, their political views, whatever, as long as they're capable of the job they're doing. And unfortunately, many media hires right now, because the media's gone very lefty loony all over the place, for the most part. There's definitely an agenda there, and most mainstream people are like, this is why we don't like the mainstream media. There are people commentating, presenting, and doing the punditry work and the studio work who just aren't good enough. They are not good enough. Doesn't matter their gender, the color of their skin, whatever. They're not good enough. The quality is just not good enough. We've always had really, really good presenters and commentators from diverse backgrounds. Bill Kenwright, well, Everton. Well, that really makes things interesting at Everton if Bill Kenwright snuffed it. I would. Ooh, this will be interesting. Now, I want to know the circumstances surrounding his passing because if he's taken his life, and I'm only speculating, so I actually the headlines, we may have a bigger discussion about media coverage and on a variety of sports topics. Um, there's nothing on here on the news about Bill Kenwright at the moment. It doesn't say anything on the, but that's on one news site. Bill Kenwright. Apparently he's still alive according to his Wikipedia bio. He is 78. So, what is that? Let's have a look. Well, apparently he's let's have a double check on this. Okay, so a couple of websites are saying he has passed away. Others aren't saying. Some are, some aren't. It's all. He did have surgery only 2 weeks ago for a tumour, but his own personal website hasn't declared anything yet. No one's updated his Wikipedia entry yet. The Toffee Web, 5 minutes ago. The Guardian, only 3 minutes ago. The Daily Mail, basically all the right wing rags then. 7 minutes ago on X, formerly known as Twitter. That then really, really throws things into the air in regards to potential takeovers and the future of the club with the boardroom because that really, really throws a lot up into the air. Sorry, a friend of mine is looking for work. In regards to the Everton boardroom and the ongoing situation with Everton, with Morshy wanting to sell the club, and the 777 partners or partnership wanting to invest potentially, and obviously Bill Kenwright and his involvement in his stake. Now, whether that goes to his daughter and she continues to own the stake and wishes to sell or remain a stakeholder in the club, it's going to create an interesting dynamic now because of his passing. It's going to really impact the dynamics of the boardroom, decision making, and potential for a full or partial takeover um, of the football club. I will say this: there were those praising Bill Kenwright, but since he's been chairman, it's been a disaster for Everton. Let's be honest. Now, whether he's been badly advised and Morshi's been badly advised over the years, or they just weren't up to the task of running and owning and investing in a football club and making sure it was going in the right direction, is open for debate. But no, his chairmanship has been nothing short of a disaster. Um, I think the board was not up to standard. Um, the board made some really brain dead decisions. Um, Completely poor decision making at board level. Now, Morshi's obviously he's invested a lot of money, but I think he's been badly advised. I think while he's been willing to spend money on the club, and obviously Bill Kenwright was pushing for replacing Goodison Park for 25 years, pushing for this stadium build for over 25 years. It is very noticeable that the club has not won a trophy since 1995 and is in a relegation battle for its third straight season. Very noticeable. And that's all with Bill Kenwright at the helm as chairman. So I can understand the frustrations that Everton fans have with the potential takeover, who that potential takeover could be from, and the concerns about that American consortium, to the current ownership, where the owner seems to be out of his depth, willing to invest the money, but it's all over the place. The club itself has a shocking transfer policy. The youth policy, the youth academy, and the player development is not of the standard it was in years past. There's no managerial stability. Some of the transfers are shocking. Some of the players they've let go make you scratch your head going, they let who go? There's a lot of issues. There's no direction at the club. And they've got this very expensive stadium build. And of course, then you've got the added problem of the club's financial fair play obligations. And of course, now Bill Kenwright, unfortunately, passing away, it does make things even more chaotic. It really does. So we'll see what. Well, they've been relegated before. They've spent 3 seasons outside the top flight. The last time they were outside the top flight, Queen Elizabeth got coronated. So they have been relegated once, and they've been promoted once, but not in my lifetime, and not in you know. Um, so, but I think there is a real risk that Everton could get relegated this year. I think there is a very real risk that could happen. But this is what happens when a club is run haphazardly, and as time has gone on, worse and worse. Now, I wouldn't say the entire era of Bill Kenwright as chairman has been a disaster. No, it hasn't. But as time has gone on, the club has been run in a more haphazard manner, and is just it's not run very well. They do enough to survive in the Premier League, but in reality, they are declining as a footballing force. They're not the club they were. They're not in the European places, and they've had a managerial turnover more than I've had hot minutes. So there's as I say, no managerial stability, poor transfers. Youth academy is not producing the talent it used to, because Liverpool has obviously now really usurped them, and therefore that's attracting players. Misplaced investments. and now financial fair play issues, new stadium build that's going to be very expensive. Yeah, it's not a great state of affairs. Now, what happens with this 777 partnership if they do eventually come in with a takeover? Will they pass the director's test? Because one of the partners has got a criminal conviction for drug trafficking. It's a thing. So this is all up in the air, and it does create questions, a lot of questions. Um, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, it is sad that he has passed away suddenly. We'll see what happens. Wasps want to move to Kent. Christ, they moved to Coventry and it killed them. Um, I don't really see Kent as a rugby union supporting county somehow, because cricket is the sport that is what Kent is known for, because the sport was bloody invented in Kent. Um, Kent is synonymous with cricket. I can't see them moving to Kent being successful. Kent is not known for professional sporting teams of any nature other than Kent County Cricket Club. There's a couple of football clubs that have been professional or are professional, like Gillingham, for example. But Kent is known for its links to cricket. Rugby union, there's never been a rugby union club in the top flight or at the higher levels that is professional in Kent. It is not really. I don't. I can't see that working. If I'm honest, I can't really see that. The move to Coventry bankrupted the club. So, how is that meant to work, really? Like, there's a reason why Wasps had ongoing financial issues before the pandemic that were made worse by the pandemic that ultimately killed the Premiership club. Um, they alienated a huge proportion of their fan base when they moved to Coventry. Huge proportion. And how is moving to Kent, going to fix their problems and get them back? I really, again, some of these decisions are just harebrained decisions that make no logical sense. None. I just don't know where to begin. I, I just, yeah, I just don't know where to begin with some of the decisions. Rugby World Cup, yeah, we know about that. We discussed that. They're going to change the structure of the pool stage, so it's 14 pools. I think there'll be 6 in total. The top 2 of each pool go through, and then some of the best third place teams, basically like the Euros we have in football now. They're going to use the same qualification for the knockout stages process. In saying that, yeah, in saying that, I mean, we can have the debate on the expanded format funding, expanded tournament format, should I say, on the Euros, and of course now we're going to have, the next Rugby World Cup is going to be larger. I mean, there are pros and cons with expanding any tournament. People have argued against expanding the World Cup. Now we're going to have 48-team World Cup, but we've got 3 co-hosts. Is that the right way to go? Money. And rugby unions go the same way as football. The Jersey government pulling the Reds funding for the Jersey Reds. I mean, look, again, club rugby union is in crisis. I don't think World Rugby really have got the money on the ball, or, the eye on the ball. Here. But yeah, they want to bring in this new global tournament on a 2-year cycle, so World Cup tournament, Lions Tour tournament, World Cup kind of thing, with a 2-tier system, with a 2-division system, 24 teams. They also want to expand the World Cup to 24 teams. So basically, the teams that you're playing in this 2-division, Division A, Division B, international world tournament will be the same teams that will be playing at the World Cup in, I think, is it 6 pools or something? And that's all well and good. But the club game outside of France and North America and Japan is in crisis. You know, the professional and semi-pro club game is in meltdown financially. And this is yet another team that's having funding issues. Newcastle Falcons have got funding problems or money issues. That's why the Newcastle Thunder Rugby League side, which they were helping to fund, is just taps have been turned off. So we really need to have a solution or ideas put on the table to assist the domestic club games across the world, outside of France, Japan, and North America, because it's just not working. It's not working. And even international rugby unions, like unions, the governing bodies of countries, have got money problems. So there is a massive financial problem with rugby union. Now, rugby league has also got money issues. Well, mostly in Europe, but I wouldn't say Australia and New Zealand and Papua New Guinea and the Pacific Islands are in a perfect state. There are imbalances, and there are some teams that are struggling a little bit, and not all the grassroots is working as well as it should. Outside of Queensland and New South Wales, I don't think the grassroots game is in the best of shape. So it's an interesting one that, again, clubs have got money issues, cash flow problems. And I think the COVID pandemic has sped up some of the issues. I was arguing this about the football money bubble. COVID pandemic sped up the process whereby some of the big clubs, their debts went through the roof and they really pushed the Super League idea. COVID had sped up the process by 5-10 years. We would be having the same debate we are having right now about club rugby union and club football in regards to the money aspect. In 5-10 years' time, we've just had it move forward. The last 3-4 years, 3.5 years, the issues have been very well highlighted. There is no escaping it. No, there is no way to escape it. But look, I mean, we are in this situation. We've allowed ourselves to get in this situation by us, the stakeholders, the fans, not really complaining when times were good. The governing bodies have been chasing money. Some of the clubs have got very wealthy, and some of the clubs that are very historical, strong community roots, have hit some hard times and then, or overspent, or whatever. Bad owners have got in there, some bad characters have got in there. Bad actors is a good term. And we've ended up, prior to the pandemic, where the warning signs were there for several years, different warning signs. So Barcelona selling Neymar, for example. That should have been a warning sign that, hang on a second, this club is spending more than it's making. This club is losing money. Pandemic comes, and suddenly they force the European Super League idea. Then we find out that they're 1.3 billion euros in debt. They've lost all this money. We find out Real Madrid, another one of the driving forces behind the European Super League, nearly €1 billion in debt. The only club involved in the European Super League at that time to have turned a profit in the previous 12 to 24 months was Chelsea, because they had a transfer embargo. They could not sign new players in the transfer market unless they were free or on loan. And they made very, very, very small profit. All the others made massive losses and debts. Chelsea were in profit for that period of time. So make of that what you will. Some people are claiming, like clubs like Tottenham or something, making all this massive, they're in, in black, making all this money. They still have lots of debt. They haven't paid the debt off. So there's that. But anyway, I'm going to call that a day. Thank you very much for all your questions. It was a very interesting live stream. We've covered a fair few topics. Obviously, I will be doing a video on Sir Bobby Charlton. That will be very, very interesting. A career video on Bobby Charlton. I'll do a career video on Shaka Hislop, because he played for a lot of clubs and had a lot of appearances. Shaka Hislop is a very, very interesting player. Seen him play many times. One of my favourite goalkeepers, underrated goalkeeper. Sort of a cult hero for some, though especially fans of Portsmouth, West Ham and Newcastle, a bit of a cult status for Shaka Hislop. And I think Dennis Law, because he was the first player to score 5 goals in a league game, at a club game. 5 goals in a game, first player to score was Dennis Law. And I believe that was before he went to Manchester United. I believe Dennis Law did that. So there's a couple of career videos for football to look at. I think I've got a few more football club histories that I'm going to be doing at some point. They'll be fun to do. They've actually had a real resurgence on the club history playlist. So there's a few more club histories that I'm gonna look at, and yeah, so there's some more content ideas for the coming days and weeks. When I do those career videos, I think we'll let dust settle a little bit with Bobby Charlton. I think it's unfair before we do his career video. I think Dennis Law is going to be really interesting, and Shaka Hislop is just Shaka Hislop. He's a cult figure. He's a very good pundit, though. Again, very much he's like the Trinidad version of Michael Richards for ESPN. He enthusiastic, bundles of energy, and really knows his stuff. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll have content for you, more content for you, very, very soon. I need to go for a chat.